Hello Year 8 and welcome to week 2 of your online lessons. I'm Mrs. Wright and what you're going to be focusing on this week is how to analyse poetry well. All you need for this lesson is a copy of your poem called The Flag, which you should be able to find in your work pack. Flags. So before we go any further and read the poem, I think it would be useful for us to consider, well, what do flags represent and why do we use them? There's kind of lots of different reasons for this. So I would suggest you hitting pause, jotting down a few ideas of those two questions. So what do flags represent and why do we use them? You can use the images for help. Hopefully you've had time to jot a few ideas down, but here's some ideas that I came up with. Flags could represent a country, your support for that country. Interestingly, flags are really thoughtfully designed in terms of their colours and their patterns and what they symbolise. So for example, the American flag, the amount of stars on it represents how many states there are. And then flags can be used for lots of different reasons. I came up with just a few. So one of them could be a signalling device. For example, a white flag indicates if you want to surrender, so it's often been used in battle. They could simply be used for decoration, used as a symbol, perhaps for your support, and then a sign of nationalism. Now we're going to have a quick look at the poem Flag by John Agard. But before we do that, just to give you a bit of an overview of what the poem is about. So the poem is about Agard's concern with what a flag represents. But it might seem a simple object, but it can hold a lot of power over an individual, as it ties them to patriotism and nationalism. Now those words mean where you're being devoted and have a really high support for your country. So a flag seems to symbolise loyalty, so again that being patriotic, being in high support of your country. So it seems to symbolise that loyalty, and if you have one, it shows your goodness in support of what it represents. But Agard suggests that the flag can deeply undermine that goodness. For example, if your country goes to war, the flag represents your country and it ties you into that war. So by you being connected to the flag, it's you being connected to all that that country does, the good but also the bad. Okay, let's hear from the poet himself now, reading the poem.
Flag. What's that fluttering in a breeze? It's just a piece of cloth that brings a nation to its knees. What's that unfurling from a pole? It's just a piece of cloth that makes the guts of men grow bold. What's that rising over a tent? It's just a piece of cloth that dares the coward to relent. What's that flying across a field? It's just a piece of cloth that will outlive the blood you bleed. How can I possess such a cloth? Just ask for a flag, my friend, then blind your conscience to the end.
Okay, so next lesson you've got Mr. Thompson, and he's going to go into a lot more detail on the language, structure and form of the poem, and he's going to analyse it step by step with you. So this week it's really important that we understand the poem, because we can't analyse something if we don't truly understand it. We need to be able to link meaning to what we're analysing, and if we don't understand what the poem means, then that's going to be really difficult. So now we're thinking more and more about, well, what is the poem about? We need to be able to understand it and be confident with it before we analyse it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to just start looking again at this, a little baby step into the structure of the poem, and again start to just really think about what is it actually about. So what I've done here is I've kind of broken down each stanza. Now stanza is a posh word for a paragraph basically, and when we talk in poetry about paragraphs we always talk about stanzas. So I've kind of looked at the structure of each stanza and broken it down for us. So the first line is always quite non-alarming. It's just a gentle question. So for example, what's that fluttering in a breeze? Then again, the second line is again that kind of gentle nature to it. It's just a simple statement. Well, it's just a piece of cloth. And that just really indicates that it's no big deal. And then we kind of get a bit of a shift. So in the third line, that's where we really start to hear the poet's views. For example, where it says, that brings a nation to its knees. It starts to open our eyes to that possible darker meaning of what the flag symbolises. That maybe it's not just a piece of cloth. You might want to pause here and jot down a few notes from this slide. Let's take a look at the last stanza, because it's a little bit different to the other ones. So the last stanza goes, how can I possess such a cloth? Just ask for a flag, my friend, then blind your conscience to the end. So the just really makes it sound simple. Everyone can do it. Just ask for a flag, my friend. Anyone can do that. But then he's suggesting that when it says then blind your conscience to the end, but then you're bound to it and all that it does. So, for example, if your country, your flag goes to war, well, so do you. If your country releases nuclear weapons, so do you. So whatever your country does, whatever it represents, you're now tied to it. You're a part of it. You also represent that. So this simple flag, it seems to be just a piece of cloth, but actually what Agard is saying is that the meaning, what it can symbolise, can be a lot darker than what it seems to be on the surface. In order to be able to analyse the poem, which you'll be doing next week, we need to, as I've said, be able to understand the poem well. So in order to understand it a little bit more, let's take a deeper look at the poet John Agard to see where his views are coming from. So John Agard is a famous poet, playwright and children's author. He was born in Georgetown in British Guyana, now just known as Guyana. And as you can see from the map over here, that's a part of South America. And it's also really near the Caribbean. And as you could probably tell from Agard's accent when he read the poem, it does sound a little bit Jamaican. And the Guyana and the Caribbean have quite strong links. So what's interesting, I think, about this is that Guyana got its independence in 1966. But before then, it was a part of Britain. So it was a British colony. And as World War II was between 1939 and 1945, that was still when Guyana was a part of Britain. So Britain declared war on Germany, but quite a number of soldiers from Guyana fought in that war, many of whom died. So here I think perhaps we can start to understand where John Agard's views come from. Maybe this plays a part in why he's looking at a flag and seeing a deeper, darker meaning behind it. The young men that fought in the war, was it really their war to fight? Geographically, we're nowhere near South America, and it was Britain that declared the war. Yet, because the boys who went out to fight represented their country, and that country was tied to Britain, they were forced to represent that flag, to represent their country, ultimately leading to their death. So here I think we can start to possibly unravel why Agard is looking at something quite simple like a flag, but seeing how it can tie a person to their country. And that can lead them to represent the good in the country, but also the bad. That it forces us to act on behalf of that country, act on behalf of that flag, even if that's going into war, even if that means losing your life. That's all from me today, so now it's time to test your new knowledge and do the quiz. Good luck!